So, Adama, let's start with you. What was the process that got you involved with this project? And then what was your writing process like to complete your book?
I think Freshta and Salvador said it like it was very stressful. The process, I remember just getting that email. The my friend who did the documentary, or my former teacher who did the documentary on me, actually introduced me to the author and everyone, not the author, but the company. And they're like, "Hey, do you want to tell your story?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not doing anything else, sure." But I didn't understand what I was signing up for. Like you both said, it was so traumatic because, like I said, I talk about my story often, but I haven't gone into details. So, talking about actually writing down about the officer that yelled at me or the officer that interrogated me, talking about the strip searches. But it's one thing about saying it and actually seeing it in words, and these are your words. And the reality of it, it was now that it's over, I'm glad, but it felt like years, but it wasn't years. Um, but honestly, it was worth it. It was really worth it because I was able to heal in the process and address certain things that I didn't address. And I remember things that I forgot about that I feel like helped a lot of people. I often get people who come to me, well, this happened to me. I've been getting a lot of border cases recently. I advocate for immigration reform. So I have a lot of people who come from the border that are telling me their stories. It's pretty traumatic, but the fact that they trust me to tell them, people can be very vulnerable, telling you all this information, but it's a blessing that they trust me. And it's because of the book, it's because of the documentary, it's because I'm out there talking. I don't want to say I've become the face of immigration reform, but it feels like it sometimes when they're just reaching out to you. Um, but yeah, the writing process was hard in the sense of just emotionally, but in terms of writing, it was okay. And plus, we had editors to help us with the grammar if we had any issues, because I think part of it I was writing with emotions. And then they're like, well, that doesn't make sense. And I'm like, but I was angry. But yeah, we had a lot of support throughout the way. I don't know if you guys had the same, but I had a lot of support throughout the way. And if you guys didn't, I did not say that. So don't go back and tell them.
Are we talking you get up every day and you have a word count specific that you need to meet? Or what was the process of getting the actual writing? How much writing are you doing? Did you write every day? Did you write just when you felt it?
So I had part of my book already written. So as we were halfway done, but I had to go back and add certain details. But we had a timeline for everything. They needed it within a week or a month. Certain decisions were needed to be made like right there and then. So a lot of emails. Everything was done via email because it was COVID and a lot of phone calls, a lot of Zoom. So I guess the pandemic helped with that because we didn't have to show up in person, but which was good. It worked out.
And then Salvador, how did you get involved with the project and what was your writing process like?
Yeah, so my involvement with the Eyewitness series in this project starts in 2018. So because of the work that I did in Puerto Rico with Light and Hope, Dave Eggers and Amanda Yulee, who are series editors and dear mentors of mine, they reached out to me in 2018 to be a part of the inaugural International Congress of Youth Voices, which brings together 100 of the world's leading young activists and writers, and brings together and puts us in a summit in San Francisco in 2018 for a weekend. And after I first engaged in the International Congress of Youth Voices, I stayed very much close in touch with Amanda and Dave. In 2018, we hosted our second International Congress of Youth Voices in San Juan, which is where I met Freshta in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And when March of 2020 comes around, the pandemic just began. Amanda reaches out to me. She's like, "Hey, Salvador, we want to get a better perspective of your story. So would you mind sitting down for some phone interviews for the next few months and just talking with us?" And I was like, "Of course." I mean, I wasn't sure what the project was for, but I have a lot of faith and trust in Amanda and Dave. And I was like, of course, I mean, after what you've done for me, of course, is the least I can do. So we did dozens of hours of interviews for many weeks in March through April, May, June. And all of a sudden, I'd say at the end of this, I'd say it's like, I think all of us here, the sense of surprise, or at least in my case, Amanda tells me, well, awesome. So we shared your story with Norton and they want you to write a book about it. And I was like, what? And sort of going from not having no idea what this was for, and then hearing that someone like Norton is interested in you're publishing your story, to me was surreal. And I was like, of course, I mean, wow, yes. So luckily, I guess similar to Adama, because those interviews were there, Norton knew what they wanted, and sort of what they wanted from each story. We were told, at least I was told that in there, the story was geared for middle grade readers, which for me was a challenge, because much of the writing that I'd done was either opinion editorials for CNN or Time or Teen Vogue that I was contributing to, which is for older audiences, or academic writing I was doing in school. So I remember one of the most challenging things about the writing process in general was being concise with my language, being straightforward with my language, not using many commas and semicolons, and being using full stops, which for me was challenging, but it was definitely helped me improve my my concision, and also my ability to convey my emotions in a more straightforward manner that not only middle grade readers would understand, but also everyone would be able to understand just by reading it quickly. So the writing process, like Adama, it'd be like, okay, by the end of the month, we want three-quarters of the manuscript, or like full manuscript, and then the editors would come back with comments and be like, hey, these are the comments we have, give them back for that, by the end of the week. Or sometimes it's like, okay, this is closer to pub date, or when the manuscript was finalized, like around May of this year, it'd be like, okay, editors have a question about this line, please respond, in the next few hours. It was definitely exciting. I'd say it was an exciting process. Yes, like I think we've all said, the experience of writing about our experience specifically was hard. It was hard at many moments, but I'd say that the process per se I'd say for me was exciting, very exciting.
And were you in school while you were doing this?
Yes, I was. Well, I mean, so we started the interviews and all that, I believe March, April 2020, and I was in school. I was in virtual school through June of 2020, and then summer came around, and I was working, and also working on this book, and then school started. Senior year started in September. I was working on college applications and schoolwork, and this book on top of that, and then working with my humanitarian work and activism, and doing all sorts of virtual speaking engagements. So it's definitely a lot going on. My senior fall was very intense, but it was definitely all worth it, and it was very exciting and gratifying.
I feel like if we lived in a better world, we could just say, hey, world, go away for a month. I need to do a book. And then you come back and I'll have written this thing and we can get back and pick up where we left off. Adama, I don't suppose your kids were willing to extend that offer?
So surprisingly, my kids were around me. They were running around doing their own thing because it was a pandemic. So school was closed, and, they were doing a virtual learning. I would just write, and sometimes I would blank out, and I'm like, oh my God, my kids are here. Because you go into deep thought. But honestly, it was the way I cope with the emotions. I did a lot of hiking around that time because hiking became a big thing during the pandemic. So I would just get in the car and like, let's go. We're going to go for a hike now. But it was worth it. It was really worth it.
And Freshta, how did you get involved with the project, and what was your process like?
Yeah, so mine is very similar to Salvador's. So I also got involved with International Congress of Youth Voices, and I met Dave and Amanda, who were a big part of, this whole process and project that we did together. I mean, Amanda and I had kept in touch a lot over the couple years that we had met in Puerto Rico, and she was familiar with the work that I had been doing here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, but then also some overseas in a couple of the projects that I had been working on. And I want to say this was last year, during my junior year in college. She reached out to me and, she was like, hey, we, looked at all the work you're doing. We think it'd be interesting for you to share your story. And first I was like, maybe her email got hacked. And so, she's like trying to trick me, someone's there. And then I didn't respond. And then she got back to me again. I was like, oh, hey, I just wanted to make sure this was you. Yeah, so after that, I was just, very honored. I was very moved. I was like, you think I'm worthy of, being part of this project and, sharing my story. And so we kind of talked through it and what it would look like. And like Salvador said, if it hadn't been for those interviews, it might have been a little harder because of school and work. And at the time, I was also supporting my 4 nieces and nephew back at home financially. So it was a pretty busy time for me. And so we would have hours of interviews on the phone and a lot of hours where I was spending, crying and trying to get myself together. And after sobbing to, trying to bring the very emotional parts of my life and history together. And those were, kind of meaningful times of the process for me, and they were healing. And after that, just hours of emails, a lot of emails back and forth. And finally we got it all together and everything's been going smoothly since.